sometimes. I'm going to talk through essentially a presentation about what we're doing here, Project Shift, to hopefully kind of whet your questions a bit. And then would love to hear from y'all on what you have questions about. I know this environment, I've been doing it for a long time now, but this environment can be kind of strange, this Zoom world that we're in. So feel free to kind of unmute and ask questions if you've got them, especially at the end, but at any point in time. This won't take me too long to kind of go through. And most of what I'm going to be saying is just information you can find on the website, but hopefully you're hearing it from me in a little bit more detail than you would by just reading some pages on the web. But all that's to say, at the end especially, I'd love to hear from y'all and see what ways I can be helpful specifically for you and where you're at in your own journey toward learning to code and maybe even hopefully becoming a software engineer. Just a little bit about me so you know who it is that's talking and why it's me that's giving this little Q&A session. I am, Aaron, I'm the founder of Project Shift, and my background started, many years ago when I went through what was one of the first, I think, handful of what we'd call nowadays coding boot camps in the country. It was a school called Maker Square. You probably would have never heard of it now. It was eventually bought by Hack Reactor, which was bought by Galvanize, which was bought by some massive education company. So I became a software engineer because, I went through school with a religious studies degree, felt like I'd missed out on getting a degree doing something I really wanted to do. I just thought school was about, learning and academics and not about skills. And I assumed that I could just learn how to code at some other point. And I was right in some ways. I went and bought all the books I could and took all of the, at the time, lynda.com courses and just got really stuck on my own. Couldn't quite make it all the way there. So I went through a code school. And afterwards, my mind was blown. I got a job as a software engineer immediately and worked a while as a software engineer and mentored for different coding programs, but was really convicted that this way of education is the way forward. It's extremely transformative. And so I went on to eventually, this is kind of another long story, but moved to Israel with my family. We all moved over there and ended up starting the first kind of code school like this in Israel. Israel is known as the startup nation. Tel Aviv, where we lived, is sort of like Silicon Valley, but on steroids. They say that per capita, Israel has far more investments in startups than the United States does. So I did that for a while, which was, a huge learning opportunity. We ended up moving to Durham, North Carolina, not because we wanted to necessarily. My wife's mom actually got sick and they lived here. So we moved. In the meantime, I worked for an online code school called Block. At the time, it was the largest online coding program in the world. And honestly, there's a lot of lessons I learned from that. There's a lot of things that were happening in that program that I wasn't a huge fan of. And then in June of 2017, started building Project Shift. And now Project Shift was launched in Durham as an in-person coding program. We were really small, very much focused on being the top elite kind of program. I think if we were honest with ourselves, we sort of wanted to be the Harvard of coding boot camps, which meant our program was super expensive. At the last time we had an in-person program, it was $24,900, which, we had incredible results and we churned out a lot of great top software engineers to work at some really big companies. But when the pandemic hit, we were forced to go remote, and that really presented an opportunity for us to think through what does it look like to open up this program to more people. And that's when we transitioned to a fully permanent remote program and started kind of rebuilding Project Shift in hopes to allow more folks to experience this transformation that we've been able to help folks just in Durham do for a long time. And that's obviously what's launching in March of 2020 that we're going to talk a little bit more about here in a moment. But first, before we even get there, I want to talk through a couple of things about becoming a software engineer. One, hopefully you already know this. And if you're exploring different options, you probably already believe all this, that you don't need a degree. Two, obviously, but learning to code is hard. You don't need a degree, but doing it on your own is very difficult. But three, Project Shift, we can help kind of bridge the gap between those things of going on your own, but also being able to make it to the end where you can transform your your life, honestly, and start over in a new career that has growth opportunities and a ton of other benefits that I'm happy to talk through. All right, so real quickly, I want to talk about what I mean by these three things. One, you don't need a degree. Now, hopefully you already know this, but not needing a degree, a computer science degree, or whatever, when it comes to becoming a software engineer, it's both good and bad, right? It's good because it means that you don't have to go through a 4-year degree. You don't have to go back to school. You don't have to go learn calculus or whatever it is that you might feel like you have to do to get a degree in computer science to become a software engineer. It's also bad because those who do have computer science degrees don't necessarily qualify to be software engineers, right? It's not a golden ticket like you would hope maybe going and getting a degree actually is. In fact, we've had a few people come through our program who have computer science degrees who still struggle to get a job as a software engineer because a computer science degree will not teach you the actual skills you need necessarily to become a software engineer. A computer science degree is a general computer science education. There are many pathways and career paths after you finish your degree. Two, the demand here for software engineers outweighs the supply. And if you're questioning whether that's true now during COVID, it's especially true during COVID. One of the most resilient job paths right now, career paths, is software engineering. As you know, I mean, the very platform that we're using right now to communicate is thanks to software engineers and their stock, Zoom, that is doing very well during this time. So the demand absolutely outweighs the supply, which is why folks are able to look at you and say, hey, you don't need a degree. We just want to make sure that you can code. I always give the analogy that if you owned a construction company and you made money building buildings, then probably one of the key areas of work in your company would be the construction workers. So if you actually need to build buildings, then you actually need to hire someone to do the work of building the building. And if you didn't have anyone that could build the buildings, you couldn't make any money. And you're not going to go to these construction workers and say, well, I see that you can build a building, but you do not have a building degree. That would be ridiculous. And the same thing is true in software engineering, right? Software engineers build tech, right? We build the infrastructure for these companies to make the money they make. They're not going to look at you and say, oh, well, I see that you can work for me. I see that you can build my products and I see that you can make me money. But because you're not having this piece of paper, I will not allow you to do that. So luckily for us, it's not based off of that. It's democratized according to your skills. Now, there's a lot of stuff that's wrong with the tech industry. And I think the tech industry has made leaps and bounds these last couple of years in an attempt to diversify its workforce and be a place that is more representative of women and minorities. Because I think for a long time, it looked mostly like young white guys like myself who were a little bit nerdy and like to play video games. I don't actually like to play video games. I don't think I'm that nerdy, but maybe you would disagree. But anyway, thankfully, if you have the skills, you can get the job, which is amazing. Some people think it's too good to be true that you can go through a program like ours and walk away, quickly on a path to making 6 figures, but you really can. That's just the nature of the industry. It's very unique in that. But learning to code is hard. Getting there isn't so easy, and I'm sure you know that if you've tried or if you've learned a language or two along the way. The reality is you probably won't make it on your own. And I don't say that to sell you on Project Shift. I say that to be honest with you, to help you curb your expectations a little bit. And let me speak to what I mean. I've been doing this for years now. I gave you that little timeline that showed you that I've started 2 code schools. I've started a online meetup group with over 1,300 people. I've mentored for several other programs. And all that time, over all the hundreds of people that I've met who have become or attempted to become software engineers, I've only met 2 people who went from beginner zero zilch to getting a job on their own without going through some kind of educational program, mentoring program, something. Now, that might sound astonishing. You might be saying, well, Aaron, I've read all these great stories online, and I'm sure you have, right? The stories that highlight people doing this on their own are the popular ones and are probably the stories that you're going to hear. But there's unfortunately not many out there because it's extremely difficult. The two individuals, for example, that I know, both had no kids, no significant other. They had some period of flexible employment where they didn't have to work a job. They just had it all kind of, organized to their favor so that they could only focus on learning to code for a long period of time. And so just statistically, from the people that I've met and the experiences I've had, you probably won't make it on your own. And that's something that shouldn't be. You should be able to get through this, and we want to help. Two, most coding boot camps are too risky. This was something that we came to grips with at the end of the pandemic, that our statistics were great, but still I think people were more and more hesitant to pay something like $25,000 for a program, though hopefully their own ROI would be really great. Or you see this trend of ISAs, which stand for income share agreements, where essentially you don't pay anything up front to the code school, but then after you graduate, you owe them a portion of your salary, which oftentimes means you're going to pay a lot more money, sometimes 1.5, 2 times, or even 3 times as much as tuition normally would be. And so there's just a lot of risk associated with that, especially if you're going through an organization that doesn't publish their statistics or tell you exactly what the outlook is for their graduates. It can be a bit of a risk. And then 3, nothing is a full solution. It seems like there aren't very many of those out there. I oftentimes get questions on, well, what do you think about an associate's degree or work at a community college or this Udemy course or that? And the reality is they're all great, but none of them are a full solution. You need to develop yourself as an individual, your skills as a software engineer, your basic hard coding skills, and your own career development skills, right? You need to be able to walk out of here able to actually land a job, network, get an interview, because that's going to be the hardest part. Is on paper, you don't look like a software engineer. You have no previous experience. If you cold apply for 200 jobs, I would bet you $1,000 you're going to get 200 rejections because your resume is not going to get picked up by the applicant tracking software. So there's got to be another way. And that's something that we want to be able to help with. So obviously that brings me to Project Shift can help. So I'm really going to talk a little bit about our solution and what it is that we've come up with to help you make it to actually landing your job as a software engineer. First of all, we have a self-paced curriculum. Now, some folks move faster or slower than others. We require a code challenge for admissions. So everyone who comes through our program has a baseline of programming abilities. We can help you get there if you don't have any programming abilities to start with. But even then, people learn differently at different speeds. And so our curriculum is designed to allow you to go sort of as fast or slow as you want within given parameters. So you are able to watch videos, go through your own tutorials and exercises, all content that we've created, but we assign you one-on-one mentors. Now, these mentors are senior level developers experienced in helping mentor software engineers at their own companies. So they're already trained up to do this better than anyone else in the world. And you get several sessions every week of one-on-one time with your mentors. They're prepared. So they already know what it is they want to talk to you about. And they're, of course, there to answer your questions as well. They're also available 24/7 via Slack, as all of your other classmates, instructors, and mentors are as well. So even though your curriculum is self-paced, where it matters, the in-person time is there for you. We have an online community that's always on. So there's always a Zoom room that you can pop in to hang out with your other classmates and check in on what they're working on. And especially when you get to group work, that's going to be extremely valuable. And then for our curriculum, we've got 2 main tracks. Now, obviously the bulk of what you're going to be doing, the 85% majority is our software engineering program, right? Which is the meat of what it is that you're going to be working on. So we have 16 modules focusing on full stack JavaScript, not because we think JavaScript is the thing we want you to learn, but JavaScript is going to be our learning tool, our teaching tool, where you can do both front end and back end development without having to switch contexts, learn new languages on the fly, because as a beginner, you want to stick with one language, right? If you were first learning your first foreign language, I wouldn't say, awesome, which languages do you want to learn? Let's go tackle French and Spanish. I'd say, let's tackle one. Let's learn French. And then it's going to really help you create those learning faculties in your brain to pick up another language later on. So that and computer science principles, and we're going to be building real world projects. So about half of our graduates historically have gotten jobs in languages and frameworks that we didn't teach. And we're proud of that. That doesn't mean that we didn't teach the right stuff. That means they were able to learn new things on the fly. So you're really open to any job in the realm of software development whenever you come out of this. And then we've got 11 modules regarding career development on resumes, networking, landing your interviews, salary negotiation. What does this unique job search look like for you as a career changer versus someone who, has 2 or 3, 5 years of software engineering experience, or even has some kind of degree? It is unique, and you're going to need that special kind of training to be able to get there. 6 months of career services, one-on-one. So you have these one-on-one mentoring meetings throughout the program with software engineering mentors. When you graduate, we pair you up with someone who's an expert in career services. That means the actual job search. And I'll give you an example. We had a student once, great guy, had, I think a fine resume, was very personable, very skilled in software engineering whenever he graduated, but it seemed like he just wasn't landing a job. And so his career services coach was able to kind of assess where he was. We kept pieces of data every week on his applications, how many of those weren't converting into interviews, et cetera, and realized, hey, maybe this guy is just being really strange in the interviews. And so our career services coach set up a mock interview with him, and that was it. He just got really, really awkward in the interviews, and that's what was the bottleneck for him. And so after that, the career services coach was able to give him some tips on how to loosen up and how to be more personable in the interview process. And he landed a job within a few weeks, and he's still at that job right now. So this is super valuable for you. It probably won't take you 6 months. In fact, we've never had it take 6 months before that I can think back on. But it's there just in case it takes you that long and you want to be picky in your job search. You are welcome to do that. Our tuition, as I told you, it used to be $24,900. Because we're remote and online, we've saved a lot of cost. We are no longer just in the market for folks who want to move all the way to Durham. We can host this program anywhere we want. And so our tuition, thankfully, has been lowered to $7,900. We have 2 options. We've got a 3-month full-time program where essentially you cannot work another job. This is what you're doing. You're eating, sleeping, breathing our program. Or 6 months part-time. And that does allow you to have a full-time job. In fact, part of the pre-work curriculum has a whole course we built called How to Focus When Learning to Code. And it literally helps you very practically, step-by-step, create your schedule, your calendar of how can you free up, hours every week, even if your life is busy, maybe you're married with kids and a full-time job. How do we make sure that we carve out time for coding? And how do we stay focused during that time? We're very much so about you figuring out how to juggle both those things in this season. And then our deadline. So our start date is March 15th, 2021. So we still have several months to go, thankfully. So regardless of your experience, you have the ability to, between now and then, to learn what you need to be prepared for the admissions process. Our next prep course is next Tuesday. So the prep course is designed to help you learn the fundamentals of JavaScript, to go from 0 to 20 in terms of JavaScript. And it should be enough for you to be able to pass our admissions code challenge. And so if you don't feel like you're ready for our code challenge, and we actually have a quiz to give you to help you determine whether or not you're ready. If you're not ready, you can go through our prep course. Our prep course is $500, but if you pay the deposit, which is $986, so the deposit will hold your spot in the program while you're able to go through the prep course, or if you want to do your own kind of learning for JavaScript before you're able to actually take the code challenge. For the deadline for that is February 1st. The prep course, the deposit saves your spot. And if you pay the deposit, we'll give you the prep course for free. We're not going to make you kind of pay double in the beginning here. And then if you pay the deposit by November 30th, we'll give you $500 off tuition. And so instead of 70,000 or 7,900, it'd be 7,400. Then, as I said, the code challenge deadline. So the deadline in which you want to be prepped to take the code challenge is February 1st. And so hopefully you've learned all the fundamentals of JavaScript by then. And if you're already there, then awesome. You can go ahead, apply, take the code challenge, and get started. And we, as of right now, so I'm looking at the whiteboard over here, we've got 6 spots left in the program. We've got 4 left in the part-time program. We've got 2 left in the full-time program. So I need to update our little graph over here. So definitely, if you're considering doing this and you're serious about it, you'll want to consider the deposit and by the way, it's fully refundable between now and February 1st. So if life happens to you, you pay the deposit, we'll give all your money back. We're not trying to make money off deposits. We're just trying to make sure that those who want to do this know that the kind of prep course code challenge process isn't a barrier. They can kind of reserve their spot while they go through that process without fear of someone coming in and taking your spot from you. All right, that was a lot of talking in sequential order, but that's all I've got to share with you. But would love to open things up for questions from the two of y'all on anything that I can be helpful with or anything I can answer on the program. Feel free to unmute or do your video or put it in chat, whatever it is that you want to do.
Hey, Aaron, Morgan here. Actually, I felt like you answered a lot of my questions. I appreciated I don't really think I have any big questions other than really just trying to figure out if I'm wanting to join your position or, join your class, because I like everything, the way that you laid it out. It seemed to be very personable and kind of like what I think I need as far as having that, because like you said, I've been doing it myself now for a couple weeks,
Awesome.
maybe a month, a few months actually. And now it's like, I think I've got to a plateau to where it's like certain things I can't grasp by myself. Like you said, it's like, no matter how much I watch people, teach me, I'm like, it's still not clicking.
Yeah, that can happen fast, that plateau. And I think a lot of it, I know for me early on, it was I'd get stuck on something and I'd have no idea if what I got stuck on was a big deal or not.
Right.
And it wasn't. And it's amazing because when I would get stuck like that, I'd get so frustrated that I would honestly, I'd quit for a little while, like maybe a week or more.
Yeah.
You realize how small those things are and you can get unstuck immediately, that just kind of, it creates this momentum, unlike anything that you could, probably do on your own. But what have you been working on, by the way? Like what kind of platforms and things have you been learning?
Well, I did the YouTube tutorial hell, as they call it.
Okay.
And I started off on VS Code. I did HTML. I think I'm pretty comfortable with HTML, CMS. I'm kind of getting a grip on JavaScript, and I also kind of part-time picked up Python just to kind of like see, if I could get a full picture, because in my mind I kind of need a full picture to kind of then break it down into smaller parts that I can understand.
Yeah.
Just how, my learning way. So it's like I started to learn all, and okay, it's starting to come together a little bit. But like I said, I'm at a point now where it's like, do I, like I said, it's that one little small. Do I need to change this one small thing, or do I need to change the whole string, and it's just now I'm getting into that part where I think I'm spinning in the mud to a degree.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome.
But yeah, I really, like I said, I appreciate your conversation. It was, I'm really considering it, because I've looked into others, and I mean, they weren't as promising or make me feel as comfortable as you have so far. So I definitely appreciate that. That's
cool. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, feel free to, if I will shoot you, you should have my email. I think I emailed everybody.
Yeah.
Feel free to shoot me questions if you've got more.
Okay.
Happy to answer those as well.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Nathaniel, anything else I can help you with?
Yeah, I had a couple of quick questions. So you said that there's a lot of videos and things. Are there any classes and lectures or anything, like any appointment viewing or any like symmetrical learning?
We don't do live lectures, but yeah, every week you've got mentor sessions and you've got time with classmates. And so those mentor sessions, they're designed to be kind of, I can send you a video. I've got a sample mentor session. Let me make a note here to send you. Because, that's like where the real teaching happens. And let me tell you why that we felt comfortable moving in that direction. Of course, previously all of our lectures were live. One, we kept them short always. Like I think we never had a lecture, or we tried to never have a lecture that was more than like 40 minutes, because when it comes to coding, the most helpful way you could lecture would probably be some live coding, where you could actually code and, students could ask questions as you go. We did that from time to time, but, it's almost like basketball, right? Basketball is a skill like coding is. You wouldn't teach basketball by doing a basketball lecture. You teach basketball by having everyone play basketball and then giving them feedback on whether or not they're good at basketball. I don't know anything about basketball, so that's probably a bad analogy for me. So oftentimes what we found was we would record all of our lectures, and students would not ask questions during the lecture, and then later on they'd go back and watch the video. Then they'd schedule at the time we had what we called office hours, which are essentially now our required mentor sessions, and then they'd ask questions later. Because if I am giving a lecture to a group of 10, 20 students, and in 5 minutes I lose you, right? Because I said something that you didn't quite understand, but you're not sure if everyone else has this question or not. Maybe you're just the one with the question. Then especially with the topics related to coding, for the next 35 minutes, if it's a 40-minute lecture, I mean, you're wasting your time, right? You're just sitting there listening to me talk about something that's beyond you. Whereas if you could have, stopped me, or in the case of watching a video, pause the video real quick, shot a message out in Slack, and then keep moving forward. So I think what we found is, even though live lectures in the beginning, and I think that's like kind of a thing that you're going to learn, is before you actually start on this path, you have what you perceive right now would be the most helpful for you. And then then you have what actually is the most helpful for you. And what we found is, yeah, you perceive that live lectures are super helpful, but then what's actually more helpful for our students is whenever we had office hours. And oftentimes students would not book the office hours. So we got to a point where we made it mandatory to book the office hours. And then they always just ask for recorded lectures. And so we kind of, that's the main motivator for why we programmed this. And to be honest, a huge reason why we're able to, I can send you an FAQ where I have a video all on this topic. But a huge reason why we're able to lower the price, because our two main instructors, we were acting as the mentors, the curriculum writers, and the instructors. Thus, the reason why we had to keep classes as small as 10 and as expensive as we did. But anyways, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that was good. And then also, like, are there any like class projects, or do we have like a coding partner that we'd be working with, like not a mentor but like another student, or is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm trying not to give you the long answer on this one too, because I think I did that last one. But we've got a group project towards the end of the program. If you go look in the curriculum, I think it's module 15 is our group projects. But throughout the program, you're able to kind of pair with students as desired. Again, this comes from experience. We had in our program, we did required pair programming for the entirety of the program. And oftentimes students would end up working on their own anyway, because, again, someone would go faster, someone would go slower. It was still beneficial. And so what we will do is, whenever you get onboarded for the program, you're going to kind of create a schedule of, hey, these are the times that I'm normally on, and probably the times when I would want to pair with other students. And then we'll give you a schedule of, all right, these are the good matches of the folks that you should work with. So it's kind of more self-generated, because we don't want to force you to do work with other students if you don't want to. But then we also want those who want to work together to find each other and take advantage of those opportunities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. One last quick question regarding hardware. Do you have a preference of Apple versus PC? Is that going to be an issue? I don't have a Apple machine. I've just got a PC, and I know that can be a sticking point for some schools.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we've always had the ability for anyone to have either. I don't know why this is popping up. I prefer that you have an Apple, a Mac, just because that's the environment that you'll probably work in as a developer and that we work in. But I think the main caveat is if you don't have one and you don't want to buy one, that's fine, but you're going to kind of be on your own when it comes to like IT type stuff, right? Like, oh, this software didn't install or something. Because to be honest, we're not going to know much, and depending on the mentors, about how to troubleshoot, PC issues. Software stuff, if it has to do with coding, obviously we can help with that. But if it has to do with in setting up your environment, you're going to be more or less on your own if you've got a PC. But there's luckily in the world of the web, there's very little environment setup that needs to happen. If Git, Node, SQL, and Mongo, those are kind of the main 4 things that you're going to have to deal with installation and setup in. But outside of that, you should be okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, feel free to ask me questions. Send me an email if you've got something else. I will kind of send you a little follow-up here, just outlaying what we talked about here. Remember, we've got that deadline coming up on, November 30th. So that is 2 weeks from yesterday. But yeah, feel free to reach out again if you got something. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your what may be your lunch hour here on a Tuesday. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
See y'all.
Appreciate it.